I was on a guided missile destroyer, the USS Cochrane. My job was radarman. I was a radar operator. I operated mostly surface to surface radar, looking for surface contacts, other ships. During carrier ops, what our job was, the carriers would cruise out in the middle of the Gulf of Tonkin they normally steamed into the wind at, say, 20 knots. And they did this 24/7. Behind them, 2,000 yards, was a destroyer. You maintained that position 2,000 yards behind the carrier at all times. Job on that was during flight operations, the carriers, the planes would take off the carriers, and then 6 to 8 hours, or 5 to 6 hours later, I suppose, whatever their fuel time was, they'd be back coming in to land on the carrier. Well, our job was, if a plane went in the water, we were there to pick up the pieces, because the aircraft carrier doesn't stop for anything. When airplanes are taking off, if one doesn't make it and he goes in the water, the picket ship, which is directly behind him 2,000 yards, he marks the spot where that plane went in the water, and we cruise that spot. We stay behind, the carrier keeps going. We stay behind, and we look for survivors. We generally, if I remember, about I would probably say every 3 to 5 days, one of the planes would go in the water, either on takeoff or on landing. They'd lose a plane. Missed the hook on landing, didn't follow up and get up to speed fast enough, or bounced wrong and flipped the plane and lost control and went in the water, and it was our job to pick up the pieces. During the day it wasn't a bad job, but in the evenings, at nights, that was a real tough situation, because it was all done with searchlights and you didn't know what you were going to see or find. We only lost one person the whole time I was there on the ship. We had a chief petty officer that died of a heart attack in his sleep during flight ops behind the carrier, during carrier operations. And we had to turn around and get special permission to turn around and take his body we went into Da Nang Harbor, and we anchored. We never got to set foot on land, but we anchored in there, and a ferry came out, picked up his body, and brought it back in, and they shipped him home. They shipped his body home. That was our only loss. Coming home was just a super holiday. I got out of the service. I separated from the ship September 23rd, 1973. Prior to that, I had bought an Austin Healey Roadster that I rebuilt in my spare time in Pearl Harbor. And I rebuilt the engine and transmission, the entire drivetrain, and did some work on the body to keep it together. And I shipped it to San Francisco right after I was separated from the ship. And then I flew I had to wait for it to be shipped via boat to San Francisco. So I had to wait another week, and then I flew home. I flew from Pearl Harbor, from Pearl, Hawaii to San Francisco. And I took a cab to the dock, and when I got to the dock, they were just unloading my car. And so I drove that car home. And it was absolutely wonderful. It was the greatest thing. It was a big relief. No more orders. Got to do what I wanted to do for a while. That trip was probably the most memorable of my service time.